The stars looked different from Veltrix. Prime Commander Jack Morrison stood near the observation window of the massive space station and watched the lights of 100 ships move slowly. Against the darkness, some of those ships were bigger than cities, some carried weapons that could break moons apart, and somewhere among all those lights was his own vessel, the Times Resolute. Asterisk. Looking very small and very human, today was the day of the great military exhibition. Every species in the Galactic Confederation would show their most powerful weapons. They would demonstrate their technology. They would try to impress each other with destruction and fire. Jack had seen the schedule. The Thravari would go first with their plasma lances. The Nith would follow with their gravity crushers. 11 species would present their finest instruments of war. Humanity would go last. Jack turned away from the window and walked through the crowded halls of the station. Aliens of every shape moved past him. The three very were tall reptiles with green scales and yellow eyes. They walked with their heads high because they had ruled galactic warfare for 10,000 years. The Nath floated like ghosts made of silver light. They barely looked at the other species because they considered themselves above such simple concerns. There were others too, insect creatures with clicking legs, stone beings that moved like walking mountains, beings of pure energy that hummed as they passed. And then there were the humans, 60 years in the Confederation, the youngest species, the newcomers, the children. Jack found his crew waiting near the exhibition hall. Lieutenant Katie Brennan stood beside a large metal container on wheels. Her red hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her face showed no expression. She had been preparing for this moment for months. Is it ready? Jack asked. Ready as it will ever be, Commander, Katie replied. She put her hand on the container. Though I still think they are going to laugh at us. Let them laugh, Jack said. Danny Cho, the young communications officer, walked over with a tablet in his hands. Sir, I have been listening to the alien broadcasts. They are already making jokes about us. They are saying that humans probably brought a sharp stick to the exhibition. Jack smiled. They are not entirely wrong. The exhibition hall was enormous. It could have held a dozen football stadiums inside it. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy sat in curved rows of seats that circled a central platform. Lights floated everywhere, recording everything for broadcast across known space. The three very went first. High Commander Vorath, the leader of their military forces, stepped onto the platform. He was 8 feet tall with scales that shimmered between green and gold. His eyes burned with pride. Behold, Vorath announced, the Thravari plasma lance array. A massive weapon rose from the floor. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Crystal tubes wrapped around a core of burning energy. When it fired, a beam of pure plasma shot across the demonstration area and struck a target asteroid that had been placed there for this purpose. The asteroid did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next moment it was vapor. The crowd cheered. Vorath smiled with all his sharp teeth. The Nath came next. Their representative did not walk but floated to the platform like a creature made of moonlight. She raised one delicate hand, and a machine behind her hummed to life. The graviton pulse Generator, she said in a voice like singing. It creates gravity so strong that nothing can escape. The machine fired at another asteroid. The rock did not vaporize. Instead, it crushed inward. It folded into itself again and again until it became a ball no bigger than a fist. Ball so dense that nothing could break it. A ball that would last forever. More cheering, more impressed murmurs. One by one, the other species showed their weapons, beams that could cut through planets, missiles that could think for themselves, fields that could stop any attack. Each display was more impressive than the last. Each species seemed more powerful than the one before. And then it was humanity's turn. Jack walked onto the platform with Katie beside him. Behind them, 2 crew members wheeled out the metal container. The hall fell silent. Millions of eyes in every shape and color watched the humans. Katie opened the container. She reached inside and pulled out the weapon. It was a gun. A simple metal gun mounted on a rotating platform. It had no glowing crystals. It had no floating energy cores. It was just metal and machinery painted in flat green, looking like something from a history museum. The silence lasted 3 seconds, then the laughter began. It started with the Thravari. Voreth's deep rumbling chuckle echoed across the hall. Then the others joined in, clicking and hissing and singing and humming. Every species laughed in their own way, but they all laughed at the same thing. What is this? Vor called out. He did not even try to hide his amusement. Did the humans bring a museum piece? Is this a joke for our entertainment? Jack stepped forward. His voice was calm and clear. This is the M2 Browning Heavy machine gun. The basic design is over 800 years old. Our engineers have modified the ammunition for modern combat, but the weapon itself remains mostly unchanged. More laughter, louder. This time, 800 years. Voreth shook his head, his scales rippling. My people stopped using projectile weapons before your species learned to write. This is a relic. This is a toy. This is an insult to this exhibition. Katie's hands tightened into fists, but she said nothing. A Nath delegate spoke next, her voice dripping with pity. Perhaps the humans do not understand. We use energy weapons now. We manipulate gravity and plasma and the fundamental forces of reality. Throwing small pieces of metal is what primitives do. It is what animals do when they throw stones. Jack looked at the weapon. He thought about all the battlefields where it had served, all the soldiers who had trusted their lives to its simple design, all the enemies who had underestimated what a piece of metal moving very fast could do. I understand completely, Jack said, and I look forward to showing you what this primitive weapon can do. The laughter continued as the humans left the platform. It followed them through the halls. It spread across the galactic network. By the time Jack returned to the Times Resolute *, comedians on a 100 worlds were already making jokes about the foolish young species who brought an ancient gun to a modern exhibition. But Jack was not worried. He had seen the performance reports. He had studied the testing data, and he knew something that the laughing aliens did not. Sometimes the old ways worked best. The joke spread faster than light itself. Within hours of the exhibition, every news network in the Confederation was talking about the humans and their ancient weapon. Danny Cho sat at his communication station on the Times Resolute Times and watched the messages pour in, his screen filled with mocking symbols from a dozen alien languages. His translation software worked overtime to convert the insults into words he could understand. Primitive apes with their throwing sticks did humanity send their museum instead of their military. Perhaps we should give them some rocks to throw, it would match their technology level. Danny turned off his screen and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 days had passed since the exhibition. 3 days of constant mockery. 3 days of watching humanity become the joke of the galaxy. In the engineering section of the ship, Lisa Hartwell worked on the M2 platforms they had brought to the exhibition. She was a short woman with strong hands and grease on her face. Her job was to keep the ship running, and she was very good at it. But even she had started to wonder if they had made a mistake. Maybe we should have brought the rail gun prototypes, she said to herself as she checked the ammunition feeds. Something that looks more impressive, Commander. Morrison found her there an hour later. He walked through the engineering bay with his hands behind his back, looking at the weapon systems mounted on their testing platforms. Having doubts, Chief, he asked. Lisa looked up from her work. Permission to speak freely, sir. Always. The whole galaxy is laughing at us. Every species thinks we are fools. Even our allies, the few we have, are asking why we embarrassed ourselves like this. She wiped her hands on a rag. I believe in this weapon, Commander. I have seen what it can do, but sometimes I wonder if we should have played their game instead of ours. Jack picked up one of the modified rounds from a nearby table. It was heavy in his hand, solid, real. Do you know why I chose this weapon for the exhibition? Because it works. Because it has always worked. Jack turned the round over in his fingers. 800 years, Lisa. This design has been killing enemies for 800 years. It survived 2 world wars. It survived the digital age. It survived the space age. Every time someone invented a new weapon, they looked at the M2 and decided to keep it anyway, because nothing else did the job better. Lisa nodded slowly. I understand that, sir, but the aliens do not know our history. Then perhaps it is time they learned. On the bridge, Katie Brennan was having a similar conversation with Ethan Cruz, the ship's helmsman. Ethan was young, barely 25, with quick hands and quicker reflexes. He had wanted to be a pilot since childhood, and now he flew one of humanity's finest vessels. I do not care what they think, Katie said. She stood near the weapons console looking at the readouts. Let them laugh. When the time comes, they will see what we can do. Ethan turned in his chair. And when will that time come? We are peacekeepers in a peaceful galaxy. The Confederation has not fought a real war in 2,000 years. Their weapons are for show. Ours might be practical, but what good is practical when there is nothing to fight? Katie did not answer. She did not have an answer. The days continued to pass. The Times resolute times remained docked at Veltrix Prime, while the Confederation Council debated what to do about humanity's embarrassing display. High Commander Vorath had formally requested that humanity's military standing be reduced. He argued that a species with such primitive weapons could not be trusted to defend Confederation territory. Jack attended the council meetings. He sat quietly while alien delegates spoke against humanity. He listened to proposals that would strip his people of their rights, their stations, their place in the galactic community, and he said nothing. because there was nothing to say. Words would not change their minds, only actions could do that. 2 weeks after the exhibition, Danny received an unusual message. It came from the outer reaches of the Veltrix system, from a science station that studied space itself. "Commander," Danny said, his voice suddenly sharp. "You need to see this." Jack walked to the communication station. The message was text only, sent in an emergency format that bypassed normal channels. "Spatial anomaly detected." Danny read aloud, "Unknown origin. Growing in size. Recommend immediate investigation." "How big?" Jack asked. Danny checked the data. His face went pale. "Sir, it started as a point of light. Now it is larger than our moon, and it is still growing." The bridge fell silent. Katie moved to her weapons console. Ethan gripped his controls. Lisa's voice came over the intercom, asking what was happening. Jack looked at the data scrolling across Danny and LT Unc and GTY's screen. The anomaly was unlike anything in the Confederation's records. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was not a weapon test. It was something entirely new. "Contact the station commander," Jack ordered. "Tell them we are on our way." The Times, Resolute Times, detached from Veltrix Prime and burned toward the outer system. Other ships followed, curious about the strange readings. 3 Vari warships, Nath cruisers, vessels from a dozen species, all heading toward the growing light. Jack stood at the front of his bridge and watched the anomaly grow larger in the view screen. It looked like a tear in space itself, a wound in the fabric of reality, and through that wound something was coming. "Energy readings are off the charts," Katie reported. "I have never seen anything like this." "Neither has anyone else," Danny added. "The Thrivari flagship is scanning it too. They are just as confused as we are." The tear continued to grow. It was no longer the size of a moon. It was the size of a small planet, and now shapes were visible inside it, dark shapes moving against the light, shapes that were getting closer. "Commander," Katie said softly, "something is coming through." The first creature emerged from the rift like a nightmare made solid. It was massive, larger than any ship in the fleet. Its body was made of crystal and stone, angles and edges that caught the light and threw it back in painful patterns. It had no eyes that Jack could see, but he knew it was looking at them. He could feel its attention like a weight on his chest. More creatures followed, dozens of them, then hundreds. They poured from the rift in a flood of crystal and darkness, spreading across space like a stain. The Thrivari flagship fired first, a plasma lance, the same weapon that had vaporized an asteroid at the exhibition, struck the nearest creature dead center. The creature absorbed the blast. Its crystal body glowed briefly with the absorbed energy, then it continued forward as if nothing had happened. Jack Morrison watched the Confederation's most powerful weapon fail completely. And for the first time in his military career, he smiled. "Well," he said quietly, "it looks like they are going to need our museum piece after all." Chaos came quickly to the Veltrix system. The creatures from the rift spread like a plague of crystal and stone, and everything the Confederation did to stop them failed. Jack Morrison watched from the bridge of the Times, Resolute Times, as the greatest military powers in the galaxy learned a terrible lesson about their advanced weapons. The Thrivari threw everything they had at the invaders. Plasma lances fired in waves. painting space with burning light. The beam struck the crystal creatures and simply vanished. The energy soaked into their bodies like water into sand. Some of the larger creatures actually seemed to grow stronger when hit, their crystalline forms glowing brighter with each absorbed blast. They are feeding on it, Katie Brennan said, her voice filled with disbelief. The plasma is making them stronger. The Nath tried next, their graviton pulse generators hummed to life, creating fields of crushing gravity that should have squeezed the creatures into nothing. The pulses hit their targets and scattered. The crystal bodies bent the gravity around them, redirecting the force in all directions. Several Nith ships caught their own reflected attacks and crumpled like paper. All energy weapons are ineffective, Danny Cho reported. He was reading data from across the fleet. Particle beams, plasma, gravity pulses, focused radiation. Nothing is working. The creatures absorb or redirect everything. More species tried. The insect-like breath fired acid torpedoes that dissolved on contact with the crystal hides. The stone beings, called the Mendari, launched magnetic bombs that simply bounced away. Every advanced weapon, every proud technology, every demonstration of power from the great exhibition became worthless against this new enemy, and the creatures kept coming. The rift pulsed like a wound that would not close, and with each pulse more of them emerged. Jack counted them at first, 50, 100, 200. He stopped counting when they passed 500 and kept increasing. Veltrix Prime sent out distress signals. 40,000 civilians lived on that station. Families, children, workers who had never held a weapon in their lives. They were directly in the path of the advancing swarm. High Commander Vorath appeared on the communication screens of every ship in the fleet. His scales had lost their proud shine. His yellow eyes were wide with something Jack had never expected to see in a Thravari warrior. Fear all ships, Vorath commanded. Protect the civilian transports. Begin evacuation of Veltrix Prime. Immediately. Priority 1. Get the non-combatants away from the system. The fleet tried to reorganize. Ships that had been firing at the creatures now turned to escort civilian vessel. Transport shuttles launched from the station in desperate waves, carrying as many people as they could hold, but the creatures were faster. A pack of smaller crystal beings broke away from the main swarm. Each one was the size of a fighter craft, their bodies sharp and angular like living weapons. They headed straight for the evacuation corridor, the only safe path away from the station. They are hunting the civilians, Ethan Cruz said. His hands gripped the controls so hard his knuckles turned white. They know exactly what they are doing. Jack watched the tactical display, dots representing civilian ships, dots representing the creatures, the distance between them shrinking every second. Commander Lisa Hartwell's voice came over the intercom. From engineering, our weapons are loaded and ready. The M2 platforms are hot. The rail gun batteries are charged. Just give the word. Jack did not give the word, not yet. He was watching the other ships in the fleet, watching them throw their useless energy weapons at enemies that simply swallowed the attacks. He was watching the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy fail. A Thravari destroyer moved to intercept the pack heading for the civilians. It was a beautiful ship, all curves and power, covered in plasma lance arrays that could normally cut Through any enemy, the ship fired. Everything it had, the crystal creatures, ignored the plasma completely. They crashed into the destroyer like meteors, their sharp bodies cutting through the hull as if it were made of soft clay. The ship broke apart in seconds, its power core detonating in a flash of white light that did nothing to slow the creatures down. Katie turned from her console. "Sir, we need to do something. Those people are going to die, Danny," Jack said calmly. "Open a channel to the fleet, all frequencies." Danny worked his controls. "Channel open, Commander." Jack took a deep breath. "This is Commander Morrison of the Earth Vessel Times. Resolute Asterisk. We are moving to defend the evacuation corridor. All ships clear a path. We will engage the enemy directly." The response came immediately from a dozen sources. Confusion, disbelief, more mockery. "Even now, human vessel, your weapons are primitive," a Nath captain responded. "If our technology cannot stop these creatures, your ancient guns certainly cannot." Voreth's voice cut through. "Stand down, Resolute Asterisk. You will only add to the casualties." Jack ignored them both. "Ethan, take us in full speed. Put us between the creatures and the civilian corridor." "Yes, sir." Ethan's hands moved across the controls, and the Time's resolute time surged forward. The ship was not large compared to the alien warships. It was not covered in glowing weapons or advanced technology. It looked plain and functional, like a tool built for a purpose, but it moved with confidence, cutting through space toward an enemy that had destroyed everything sent against it. Entering weapons range in 60 seconds, Katie reported. "All stations prepare for combat," Jack commanded. "This is what we trained for. This is what our weapon was built for. Simple physics, simple mechanics, fast-moving metal hitting the target." Lisa came over the intercom again. 8M2. "Platforms ready. Railgun batteries ready. Emergency kinetic systems ready. We have enough ammunition for 20 minutes of sustained fire." 20 minutes. Jack looked at the swarm on his tactical display. Hundreds of creatures with more coming through the rift every minute. 20 minutes would not be enough, but it might be enough to give the civilians a chance. "All hands," Jack said, and his voice carried through every speaker on the ship. "The galaxy is watching." They laughed at our weapon. They called it primitive. They said we were children playing at war. He paused. "Now let us show them what children can do." The Time's resolute times charged toward the crystal swarm alone. The first creature came at them like a comet made of glass and malice. Its body was all sharp angles and reflected light, beautiful in a way that made Jack's stomach turn. It had absorbed 3 plasma blasts from Thrivari ships, and its crystal hide glowed with stolen energy. Katie Brennan did not wait for orders. Her finger found the trigger, and the M2 roared to life. The sound was different in space, conducted through the ship's hull rather than through air. It was a deep rhythmic thunder, a heartbeat of war. The gun sent tungsten core rounds down range at 3,000 ms, not beams of light, not pulses of energy, just metal, just physics, just very fast pieces of very hard material. The first round hit the creature in what might have been its chest. The crystal there did not absorb the impact. It could not redirect kinetic force the way it redirected energy. The round punched through, leaving a hole the size of a fist. The second round followed, then the third, then dozens more. The creature shuddered. Cracks spread across its crystalline body, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Chunks of living crystal tore away, spinning into the void. The glow from its absorbed energy flickered and died. And then the creature shattered. It simply came apart, broken into 1,000 pieces by the relentless hammering of simple bullets. The bridge of the Times Resolute Times fell silent for one heartbeat. Then Danny Cho spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It worked, Commander. It actually worked. All weapons, Jack ordered, fire at will. The ship became a fortress of thunder and metal. All 8 M2 platforms opened up their synchronized fire, creating a wall of kinetic death. The rail gun batteries joined in, sending hypersonic projectiles through clusters of creatures. Even the emergency weapons engaged, Marines firing adapted ammunition from armored airlocks. The crystal swarm had never faced anything like this. They were ancient beings from another dimension, creatures that had been sealed away millions of years ago, because nothing could destroy them. Energy weapons fed them, gravity pulses bent around them. They had conquered galaxies with their invulnerability, but they had never faced bullets. The smaller creatures died first. Each one took only a few seconds of concentrated fire before cracks spread through their forms and they broke apart. The larger ones lasted longer, their massive bodies absorbing more punishment before failing, but they all failed eventually. Every creature that came within range of the Times Resolute Times fell to the simple physics of mass and velocity, enemy count dropping. Katie reported her face was fierce with concentration. 30 down, 40, 50. The other ships in the fleet were broadcasting the battle live across the galaxy. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds watched as the primitive human weapon did what their advanced technology could not. They watched crystal monsters explode under sustained fire. They watched the gun that had made them laugh become the only thing standing between the civilians and death. But the swarm was learning. The creatures began to spread out, approaching from multiple angles. They were trying to overwhelm the Times Resolute Times with numbers to find gaps in the firing arcs. Port side 3 contacts, Danny shouted. Ethan spun the ship, bringing more weapons to bear. Rail guns tracked the new threats and fired. 2 creatures shattered. The third got close enough for Jack to see the detail in its crystalline form before Katie's M2 caught it and tore it apart. We are using ammunition too fast, Lisa warned from engineering. At this rate, we have 12 minutes of sustained fire. Remaining 12 minutes, the evacuation was nowhere near complete. Transports were still launching from Veltrix Prime, still filling with frightened civilians, still trying to escape through the corridor that only the Times Resolute Times was defending. Danny Jack said, "Contact Earth Command. Tell them we need ammunition resupply. Priority 1. Already done, sir. 2 supply ships are burning hard from the outer system. It 22 minutes. 22 minutes they had ammunition for 12. The math was simple and terrible. Then we make every round count," Jack said. Katie switched to controlled bursts. Target the larger creatures first. Take out the biggest threats before the ammunition runs dry. Katie nodded and adjusted her fire. Constant thunder became a series of shorter bursts, each one precise and deadly. The larger creatures fell one by one, their massive forms cracking and shattering under concentrated fire. Three very voice came over the communication channel. It was Vora, watching from his flagship in the rear of the fleet human vessel. Your fire is effective. How is this possible? Our sensors show you are using simple projectiles, metal and chemical propellant technology. We abandoned centuries ago. Your weapons add energy to the target, Jack replied, never taking his eyes off the tactical display. Ours remove structure from the target. These creatures absorb energy, but they cannot absorb holes. We are not trying to burn them or crush them. We are just punching through them until there is nothing left to hold together. Silence on the channel. Then slowly Voreth spoke again. We have kinetic weapons in our museums, relics from our primitive past. Can we adapt them for use? Not in time, Jack said. For now, just keep the civilians moving. We will hold the line as long as we can. The battle continued. The times, resolute times, twisted and turned, bringing different weapon platforms to bear as the swarm attacked. From every direction, Ethan flew the ship with desperate skill, dodging crystal bodies while keeping the firing arcs clear. Lisa pushed the engines beyond their limits, extracting every bit of speed and maneuverability she could find, and the M2 Brownings kept firing. They had been designed in a different era for a different kind of war. They had been built to stop charges across muddy fields, to defend positions against overwhelming numbers, to keep firing when everything else failed. Now, 800 years after their creation, they were doing exactly what they had always done. They were holding the line. Ammunition at 5%, Lisa reported. Her voice was strained but steady. Maybe 3 more minutes of fire. Jack looked at the tactical display. The evacuation was almost complete. Most of the transports had cleared the danger zone, but there were still 3 ships left, moving slowly because they were packed with too many people. 3 ships, 3 minutes, and still a dozen creatures between them and safety. Ethan, put us in their path. Use the ship as a shield if you have to, sir. If they hit us directly, I know, do it. Anyway, the times, resolute times, moved into position, placing its hull between the last transports and the remaining creatures. Katie fired in short, careful bursts, making every round count. 1 creature fell, then another, then a third. The rail gun batteries went silent as their magazines emptied. 2 creatures left. 1 M2 platform still firing. Ammunition depleted, Lisa announced, switching to emergency reserves. The emergency reserves were the personal weapons of the crew. Shotguns, rifles, pistols. Marines opened airlocks and fired into the void, their bullets tiny compared to the M2 rounds, but still deadly to crystalline bodies that had never evolved to resist kinetic force. 1 creature fell. The last one came straight at them, all weapons dry. Katie said. Her voice was flat. Accepting the creature was 50 m away, 40, 30, and then it exploded, hit from behind by railgun fire from a human supply ship that had arrived 10 minutes early. Jack Morrison let out a breath. He had not realized he was holding the tactical display. Showed clear space around the evacuation corridor. All civilian transports were safe. The remaining creatures were retreating toward the rift, confused and damaged by the only enemy that had ever hurt them. This is Captain Amy, north of the supply vessel. Times Endurance asterisk. A voice came over the radio. We brought more ammunition than you asked for. Commander, we figured you might need it. Jack laughed. It was a tired laugh. Exhausted and relieved, Captain North. Your timing is perfect. Now let us finish this. The battle for Veltrix lasted 11 hours. After the supply ships arrived, the Times, Resolute Times, and its kinetic weapons became the center of the defense. Other human vessels joined throughout the day, each one carrying the same primitive technology that the galaxy had mocked just weeks before. Together they formed a wall of thunder and metal that no crystal creature could pass. The Confederation fleet watched in silence. Ships that had thrown their most advanced weapons at the invaders now stood back and let the humans work. Plasma lances cooled, graviton generators powered down. The most sophisticated military technology in the galaxy became nothing more than observation platforms. When the last creature fell, broken into 1,000 crystalline shards by sustained M2 fire, the rift in space began to close. Whatever force had opened, it seemed to realize that its invasion had failed. The wound in reality folded in on itself and vanished, leaving behind only debris and the memory of terror. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Times, Resolute Times, and looked at his crew. They were exhausted. Katie's hand still trembled from hours of continuous firing. Danny and LT, Unk and GT, Y's eyes were red from staring at screens. Ethan slumped in his chair, his reflexes finally allowed to rest. Lisa had not left engineering for the entire battle, keeping the ship running through damage and strain. They had done it against an enemy that had defeated every advanced weapon in the galaxy. They had held the line with 800-year-old technology. Commander, Danny said softly, you have a message from High Commander Vorth. Jack straightened his uniform. It was stained with hydraulic fluid and sweat, marked by the work of combat. He did not try to clean it, put it through. Voreth's face appeared on the main screen. The Thravari leader looked different than he had at the exhibition. The pride and mockery were gone from his yellow eyes. In their place was something that Jack had never expected to see directed at a human: respect. Commander Morrison, Voreth said, Confederation Council has asked me to deliver a message. We request your presence at an emergency session immediately. Am I in trouble? Jack asked. He was too tired for politics, too worn for careful words. Voreth made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, Commander, you are being honored. 3 hours later, Jack stood in the same council chamber where his weapon had been mocked. The curved rows of seats were filled with the same alien delegates who had laughed at the M2 Browning, but they were not laughing now. The three-very section was notably larger than before. Jack realized that many of them wore the marks of survivors, beings who had been on the transports that escaped through the corridor he had defended. The Nith representative floated forward, her silver form dimmed with what might have been shame. Commander Morrison, we owe you an apology. We called your weapon primitive. We said you were children. We were wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Voreth rose from his seat and walked to the central platform. He moved slowly, formally, with the weight of ceremony. 3 Tivari transport ships escaped through the corridor you defended. 2,000 of my people owe their lives to you and your crew. He paused and his voice became personal rather than official. My daughter was aboard one of those ships. She is 4 years old. She has her Mother's scales and her father's stubbornness. She would have died if not for you. Jack did not know what to say. He had not fought for gratitude. He had fought because there were people in danger and he had the means to help them. The council has voted, Voreth continued unanimously. Humanity is no longer a junior partner. In the Confederation, you are to be given full military standing, equal to any of the elder races. Applause filled the chamber, clicking and humming and singing in all the ways that different species showed approval. Jack stood still and let it wash over him, feeling the weight of what his crew had accomplished. But Voreth was not finished. There is another matter. The Council has formally requested that human engineers work with all Confederation species to adapt kinetic weapons for our fleets. Your primitive technology saved us when our advanced weapons failed. We would be fools to ignore that lesson. Jack nodded slowly. We will help however we can, but I want something understood. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes of every color and shape. We did not bring the M2 to that exhibition to impress you. We brought it because it has worked for 800 years. It survived because our ancestors were practical people who kept what worked and improved what did not. That is what humans do. We adapt, we endure. We find solutions that last. The chamber fell silent, listening. Your energy weapons are beautiful, Jack continued. Your graviton pulses are elegant, but the universe does not care about beauty or elegance. Sometimes the answer to an unstoppable enemy is not a more sophisticated weapon. Sometimes the answer is just a piece of metal moving fast enough. The Nith representative spoke again. Then perhaps sophistication and simplicity should work together. Your kinetic weapons for brute force, our technology for other purposes, a combination greater than either alone. That, Jack said, sounds like wisdom. The session ended with agreements signed in Clear's throat. Promises made. Humanity would share its weapons knowledge. The Confederation would share its other technologies. The galaxy would learn from what had happened at Veltrix, and no species would ever mock simple solutions again. As Jack walked back to the Times Resolute asterisk, a message arrived on his personal communicator. It was from Admiral Sethri, the Threvari fleet commander who had once joined in the laughter at the exhibition, to Commander Morrison and the crew of the Resolute. We will never mock your weapons again. We will never mock your history. You have taught us that wisdom comes not from age but from understanding that the simplest solutions often endure when the complicated ones fail. With respect, Admiral Sethri. Jack showed the message to Katie as they boarded the ship. She read it twice, then smiled. 800 years of continuous service, she said. I think the M2 just earned another 800. Jack looked out the viewport at the stars, at the place where the rift had been, at the ships from a dozen species that had all learned the same lesson. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Advanced civilizations had built technologies that seemed like magic, but when the darkness came, when the impossible enemy arrived, it was not magic that saved them. It was a gun designed in 1918 by a man named John Browning, built to throw pieces of metal very fast, a weapon so simple and so effective that nothing had ever replaced it, a weapon that had now proven itself against threats that the original designer could never have Imagined, some things Jack thought are built to last, the time's resolute times. Turned toward home, carrying its tired crew and its ancient weapons back to Earth. Behind them, the Confederation began the work of learning from humanity's example, and somewhere in the void, the creatures that had survived the battle carried a new memory back to whatever dimension had spawned them. They had learned to fear the thunder. They had learned to fear the simple physics of mass and velocity. They had learned that the young species with the old weapon was not to be underestimated. They had learned to fear humanity, and in the end that was perhaps the most human lesson of all. When you find something that works, you keep using it, you improve it, you hand it down to your children. And when the universe throws something new at you, something that should be impossible to defeat, you do not give up. You load another magazine. You check your sights and you keep firing, because that is what humans do. That is what humans have always done, and that is what humans will keep doing for as long as the stars shine in the darkness. Threatens the M2 Browning had earned its place in history once again, and somewhere across the gulf of time, the spirit of John Browning smiled. His creation had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had kept people safe, and it had never ever stopped working.